The second angel followed and said, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries. Babylon is the symbolic system of religious imperialism. What's religious imperialism? Using the power of the state to enforce religious dogma, coerce consciences. That's religious imperialism. A system that uses governmental power to get... Remember, as soon as Nebuchadnezzar believed in Daniel's God after the fiery furnace, Babylon, head of Babylon, in the Bible, it tells us he immediately made an edict. What was his edict? Anyone who speaks badly about Daniel's God will be put to death. Religious imperialism. Use the power of the state to coerce consciences. That's what Babylon represents in the Bible. This system of religious imperialism became the Roman Christianity, with its various canon law, teaching that God's law is like human law. Breaking it requires punishment and results in the Inquisition and all of the abuses of the Dark Ages church. Further, it advanced the belief that God's law, like human law, is subject to amendment or change. Human law, which is just made up rules, can be amended and changed. And the Roman church, because they believe that's how God's law works, changed God's law. They deleted the second commandment, made the fourth the third, split the 10th into two, so we still have the number 10, and changed the day of worship from the 7th to the 1st. Why did they do that? Because they believe God's law is amenable. It works like any other human law, made up rules. You saw the bad fires in Canada hitting New York this week, didn't you? Again, I've used this example. Wouldn't it have been nice? Why didn't the church, the Adventist conference up there, pass a rule in their committee that any Adventists are not required to breathe during bad pollution days? It's a good example. Because they have no power to change design laws, how reality works. And if you think your church can change God's law, then you don't view it as design law. You view it as simply rules made up like humans make, which require external punishment. So the message of the second angel. And while Protestants, by the way, have rejected many of the specific changes that the Roman church did, they have never fully thrown off this idea that God's law works like human law. Every single Protestant church, including the Adventist church, as I just read out of this, and other places I've documented a few weeks ago, continue to teach that God's law functions like human law, which makes God out the executioner and the source of pain and death, that he must be paid in some legal way to not perpetrate upon us. This is Romanism. The message of the second angel is that system of imposed law is fallen. It's corrupt. It doesn't work. That one cannot be made righteous through legal means. Even legal adjustments in record books in heaven does not make a person righteous. A person is made righteous when their hearts are changed and the law is written on their heart and mind. And that's what the substitutionary atonement is truly about. 2 Corinthians 5:21, he who knew no sin became sin for us. Don't let anybody tell you the lie that Come and Reason and Tim Jennings does not believe in substitutionary atonement. You'll hear that a lot. It's a lie. We absolutely believe in substitutionary atonement. He who knew no sin became sin for us. Right there, substitution. But the Bible tells you why. So that we might become the righteous of God. Not so that we might be declared righteous even though we're still unrighteous, which is what's taught in the penal legal view. That you accept the payment, it goes into a record book, God declares you to be righteous even though you remain unrighteous. That's a fraud. That's fantasy. That's a lie. That's an alternate, that's a reimagined Christianity. The real Christianity is that when you accept Jesus, you become the righteous. Your heart is transformed. You get a new heart and right spirit. You are changed in your man. It's no longer I that live, but Christ lives in my record book in heaven. No, in me. That's real Christianity. We become Christ-like. We give glory in how we live because Christ lives in us. It's transformational. So the message of the second angel is that system is fallen. It's corrupt. It doesn't work. The angel calls people to leave Babylon, to get out. And it's this portion of the three angels that our lesson focuses on today in Revelation 18, that Revelation 18, the angel of Revelation 18 comes with greater authority than the second angel of Revelation 14 to repeat a message that was supposed to have already been given by the second angel of Revelation 14. Fallen is Babylon. And let's read the message of Revelation 18. The angel that comes to give the message again, which I think is what we're giving right now today. Let's hear what it says. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven. He had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice he shouted, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become the home for demons and a haunt of every evil spirit, a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird. For all the nations have drunk of the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you may not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues. The message is repeated and expanded from the second angel, but with even greater authority than it was first given. We must leave the various systems behind that teach a penal legal theology. It misrepresents God. It obstructs the final message of mercy. It keeps people trapped in a fear-based religion in which they have theologies that hide them and protect them from God, because if they don't have an intercessor up there pleading a blood to a punishing and wrathful Father, then he will hurt them. It's all fraudulent. We have to come back and worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea. This penal, legal, punishing God theology conditions minds and hearts of people to accept a God who will use his power to torture and harm and even kill in the name of justice. It is the exact opposite of what Jesus revealed when he was glorified by his Father so he could glorify his Father. We saw human systems doing all types of injustice, and Jesus was glorifying his Father by refusing to use power to punish real wrongdoing. But if we embrace the worldly view, there is a impersonator of Christ coming. And he will come with melodious voice, incredible, glorious attributes. Apparently heal the sick, apparently raise the dead, speak kind words, speak of love, but he will have rules. And if you don't keep his rules, justice requires. Now, first, he only wants to discipline, so he'll just limit your buying and selling unless you receive his mark. And then he'll imprison you. And ultimately, he doesn't want to, but justice requires that if you insist, if you won't be reconciled, if you won't worship him as your creator and God, then justice requires that he has to execute you. That's what justice does. And the whole world is wondering after this. That's right, that sounds right, that sounds right. He gave you a chance, he gave you a chance, he gave you a chance. And if he comes back and says, after all these miracles, his beautiful words, his supernatural manifestations, he says, you know, you Adventists, I appreciate you so much because you were right. I never changed the Sabbath, the Sunday. You've been faithful to me. But now it's time to worship me. And he could do it for several different ways. Now that I'm here, you've always said that you would never worship on another day unless I authorize another day. Well, I'm here to authorize another day now. That's one way. Another way, he could say, you're right, I never did. I'm calling everybody to worship me on Saturday, from Friday sunset to sunset Saturday. But if you don't, I'll be required by law and justice to kill you if you don't worship on the day I made holy. Just like the Jews who crucified Christ to keep the day he made holy. Understand, it isn't about the day, it's what the day represents. Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. It represents the Lord, and it's the principles of the Lord that matter. Satan doesn't actually care if you worship on Sabbath if you're willing to crucify Christ to keep the Sabbath.
Tim?
Yes.
Does he come as a human or
Yes, he will come.
angel?
He will come as a human because he will come as Jesus, who is still in human form. So it will become impersonating Jesus, and Jesus retained his human form. So it will become appearing as the glorified human Jesus, who is fully divine too. But that's how he'll come. And then the third angel followed and said with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast in his image and receives the mark in his forehead or his hand, we're going to pause right there. We understand the gospel, the good news about God. He is the creator. His laws are design laws. We understand that Babylon is a fallen system of imposed rules. And now we understand these first two. We have to say, what is the reality here? If anyone worships the beast, the first reality is the law of worship. It is a design law. The Bible describes it in 2 Corinthians 3:18. By beholding, we are changed. We become like that which we admire, esteem, and worship. In Romans 1, Paul says in verse 18 that through 31 that they exchanged the truth of God for a lie. They preferred images made with their own hands to the truth about God. They didn't think it was worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God. He says it repeatedly in this text, and therefore their minds became darkened, depraved, and futile. In Jeremiah 2:5, it says they followed worthless idols and became worthless themselves. It is a law that we become like that which we admire and worship. This is a design law. We neurobiologically and characterologically change. And so if they worship the beast, they mark themselves in character to be like the beast. And God leaves them to be that way. This is the first law. That's why we are told to fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And it says that when he appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. We are changed by worshiping the true God as Jesus revealed him to be. This is what the first angel called us to do. The first angel called us to reject the lies about God, to return to worship the Creator as Jesus revealed him to be. But if we don't accept the eternal gospel, if the eternal good news about God, if we don't accept that, if we don't leave the system of imposed Babylonian-type law behind, and we instead prefer the dictator God that has rules that he must use power to enforce, then we worship that God and become like that God and mark ourselves in character and behavior, forehead and hand, to be like that God. And then it says, he too will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured out full strength in the cup of his wrath. All those who reject the eternal gospel and mark themselves in character, sealing themselves, hardening their heart, destroying the very faculties that respond to love and truth, receive God's wrath, poured out full strength. No more mercy, no more diluting, no more interfering, no more interceding, no more holding at bay, no more veiling, allowing people to reap full strength what they have chosen. This is God's law of liberty. He sets people free to receive what they've actually chosen. Separation from him, the source of life and the protector and the healer and the sustainer. And when they are set free, they are put in the hands of the one they've chosen, God's destructive enemy. This is what happens. In Romans 1:18-31, we just referenced, Paul then says, the wrath of God is being revealed against all godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. That's verse 18. And in the Greek, this is the active present tense. The wrath of God is today, right now, being revealed against all godlessness and wickedness of men. And he goes and describes why, because they reject the truth about God. And in verse 24, 26, and 28, Paul tells you 3 times what God's wrath functionally is, what God actively does. Therefore, God gave them up. Therefore, God gave them up. Therefore, God gave them up. I'm going to read to you a commentary explanation from a book called Hard Sayings of the Bible, published by InterVarsity Press, on these verses. The human condition which Paul describes in Romans 1:18-32 is not something caused by God. The phrase revealed from heaven, where heaven is a typical Jewish substitute for the word God, does not depict some kind of divine intervention, but rather the inevitability of human debasement, which results when God's will, built into the created order, is violated. That's design law, built into the created order. Since the created order has its origin in God, Paul can say that the wrath of God is now constantly being revealed from heaven. It is revealed in the fact that the rejectors of God's truth, that is, the truth about God's nature and will, lead to futile thinking, idolatry, perversion of God's intended sexuality, and relational moral brokenness. The expression God gave them over or handed them over, which appears 3 times in the passage, 24, 26, 28, supports the idea that the sinful perversion of human existence, though resulting from human decisions, is to be understood ultimately as God's punishment, which we, in freedom, bring upon ourselves. In light of these reflections, the common notion that God punishes or blesses in direct proportion to our sinful or good deeds cannot be maintained. God loves us with an everlasting love, but the rejection of that love separates us from its life-giving power. The result is disintegration and death. I could not have said that better. That's design law. But I know there are a few that may be watching around the circle that are still uncomfortable, even though I've given you Bible reference from Romans 1, and have given a very good analysis from a Christian Bible commentary. They would feel more comfortable if we could have an Ellen White quote to support it. So I will give you an Ellen White quote. And this was actually written to Uriah Smith in the 1890s. He was editor of the Signs at the Times. And he didn't know what to do with it, so he filed it and never published it. It was found in the 1950s in the files in her handwriting and was published in the Selected Messages. Notice what it says.